I did want to, Adrian actually independently threw on the agenda the Advanced Healthcare Directive and Living Will. It just so happens in the portfolio we have a founder and guru in Renee with the Gentreo team that do exactly that online. And she very generously offered to share with the whole community an ability to do that. There's a link in the email that I sent that you can set that up for yourselves, share with your company. But I think also your family, I think a little bit differently from
Right.
Adrian. You know, if you've got elderly parents that aren't in the same city that you are and you can't get to them, you know, how are they going to be cared for? Those sort of things. Or even if you've got a pet and you've got to go to hospital for an extended period of time, who's going to be responsible for that animal, and making that clear. So there's lots of things you can do. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but Renee, you want to talk a little bit about that? Unlike a lot of our businesses, I think she was up 137% week over week. So she's busy. So thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that was really helpful. Julie, my sister and co-founder, is here as well. So
hi, how are you?
Hey, Julie.
We sound an awful lot alike, so apologies if you can't tell which one of us is speaking. Yeah, so for Gentreo, we've actually seen a massive increase because we do things like the advanced health care directives, the living wills. In the past, estate planning, and that's what they call it here in the US, has been relatively expensive, so the average family hasn't been able to tackle that. And then also, even for what's online out there, it really isn't very good. And your average person shows up with the wrong documents, doesn't know how to use things, doesn't know what they're doing. So that was why we created Gentreo. And then a feature too that I've encouraged all of you to use is that we have a digital vault that not only lets you share your documents with, you can pick and choose, but you can share your healthcare proxy or your advanced directive, they're the same thing, with your family members, with your doctor, so that it's all there. One of the new things that we're coming out with soon is you just hit an emergency button and it shows you, here are all your contacts, here's your healthcare directive, here, you know, here's all the things that you're going to need. So for us, we just got to do a CNBC article, and that bumped our usage quite a bit. And what we're talking to NPR now, so hoping that they're going to run a segment this weekend, because so few people, like was mentioned earlier, have these documents in place. Probably only about 18% of the US population have full estate plans in place. So some people may have a basic will, it's about 55%, but we keep trying to tell people, look, this isn't about death. This is really, really about the care you need now, right? And that's what a healthcare proxy is. And then we mentioned the pets. From a pet perspective, if you're, we're doing a program that we're launching on Monday for essential service workers. But if you have a pet and you can't be there to take care of that pet, and you try taking them to a vet these days, your pet's not going to get the service the pet needs because the vets are so afraid of never getting paid. So from the pet care power of attorney, there's all kinds of documents that we've included in there as well to make sure that people know what they're doing and that it's easy to do. And so maybe Julie, did you want to add some things too?
So one of the things I wanted to talk real quickly about is that when all of this happened, we actually set up an initiative, and we sat down as a company to figure out not only how this would affect us, because we knew we were going to expect a big spike, but then also what kind of response that we could give. What we did is we came up with a Don't Panic, Prepare initiative. It basically laid out for our company, what is the messaging that we use? We were consistent across both our PR agency. Renee can talk a little bit about what she did with the HARO leads, which are the independent help reporter out media initiatives. And then in addition, we also made sure that all of our employees had all consistent messaging so that we knew how we could help our customers, what we wanted to do. And then what we're looking at going forward with on Monday is a whole initiative to help support essential workers. What we wanted to do is we don't want to be opportunistic, because you're right, like at the first glance, it's like, wow, this is great, we can get new users. But at the same point, we don't want.
She's talking about me. I often get in trouble for celebrating and jumping up and down during a crisis. So that would be me.
We love our founders, and so And again, that's a great segue into sort of general communications for company employees. And Renee and Julie, again, I want to thank you guys for A, jumping in here on a moment's notice, B, making that available to the entire community. And again, I think a lot of us think about this, okay, it's, for your elderly parents, but I was doing a session with my college buddies last night, and they had, 6 different college kids that are distributed across continents and cities away from their parents, and they're unable to get back together. So if they got ill and they're adults,
Yeah,
it's
if you're
not.
over 18, you need, if you're over 18, you need some of your own documents. And even if
Yeah.
you're
So
married, you
yeah.
need it too.
So it's easy to do online. They've made it cost effective for all of us, so feel free to share that. And the last plug from your community is they're working on the product as we speak. So if you've got feedback for them on making the product better, easier, please get it back to them. With that, I'm going to shift it to Michael and talk about human capital, if we could.
Hi. So, I think, I know that a lot of people are kind of, sitting in this in different places. Some of you are still operating. Some of you are in big companies. Some of you are in small companies. Some of you are on hiatuses. Some of you are in Europe. Some of you are in San Francisco. Some of you are in New York. From a talent perspective, I think it's been a really intense couple of weeks. Companies have had to take on a lot of things. Sorry, that's my 3-year-old screaming. I apologize. Just very excited. This is the time of day when just things go haywire. Sorry, she distracted me. Companies have had to take on a lot of things kind of simultaneously. The first has been an approach towards working from home. And I think this is really easy for the technology-enabled community. The larger enterprises have had to really rapidly adopt video solutions and figure out ways to manage their teams remotely. I think the biggest effect that we've been seeing from a human capital perspective has been a lot of uncertainty over the path forward. We've experienced this firsthand, and I've talked to other people who are in the talent business industry saying, "Oh, we're recession ready. We've got a good balance sheet. We've got lots of cash in the bank, and things slow down. That's okay." But this has been very different because it's really been, in a lot of ways, we've seen a pause across the organizations that we've been working with. So what they've been experiencing is, very dramatic changes in their forecasting for the back half of the year. We either have seen or will continue to see very significant, layoffs. I know the Canadian government launched something or announced that they're going to announce something relatively significant on Monday. But here in the US, I was talking about seeing a 10% salary retrieval isn't, significant enough to be meaningful for a lot of the growth stage companies here. So we've already seen, we did some layoffs. We've seen Compass do some layoffs. We've seen Blink Health do layoffs. Like the list here in New York goes on and on. And it's really been kind of caused by the stop. And then we're seeing companies that are embracing kind of the pause in a more compassionate way. So what we haven't seen in kind of previous downturns, we're seeing tech workers here in New York become familiar with the term furlough, which wouldn't have been a thing that I don't think any engineers would have expected 4 weeks ago, that they're going to be furloughed, like they're working at an airline or a factory. We're seeing salary reductions, companies implementing rapidly. We're seeing layoffs, but also with the extension, of healthcare. So companies are both working to engage their existing team and in a lot of cases reduce their existing team here in this environment in real time.
I think, as most of you guys know, New York's been really hit the hardest in the US. And I think, unfortunately, probably by the end of next week will be one of the most worst hit major metropolitan areas on the planet. And so one of the reasons I asked Michael to join in is he can kind of bring that perspective, because I think we're all going to be dealing with it in one way or the other coming forward. So Michael, do you mind talking a little bit about what's going on in New York? Second thing, I would love to hear your thoughts on getting out of the macro into the micros, or how at CareerList, given the company's being a little bit more hit with this from an economic point of view, how you're managing it with the company, not only from a cash management point of view, but communication. And then feel free to ask questions, guys, too. We're going to try to make this more open to Q&A if we can.
Yeah, the personal environment, we obviously started seeing what's happening in China. Those of you who know me know I'm a bit of a survivalist, so I immediately began to stock up on things just in case. My wife thought I was crazy for the first while. I've donated many of those things since. I saw cases started for us in our clients' offices, with kind of confirmed cases, and then it tore through my 3-year-old's class. There's a really good chance it's already come through my house here. But testing is not even remotely close to being, you can't get tested. My wife should have been tested. She couldn't get it. My good friend from high school, who's a doctor here at NYU, she's 16 weeks pregnant. She has it for sure. She can't get tested. Like testing here in New York is still completely unobtainable, and inaccessible unless you're basically being admitted to hospital. You don't, or you're part of some, early research that they were trying to do to map out where it has it, but it definitely tore through my daughter's school. It's torn through our clients, and I probably have, 15 plus, 20 plus personal connections that either have had it or currently have it here in New York. Unfortunately, nobody who has it, seriously. We had one team member lose their best friend's mom and family friend to it in Brazil, but we haven't, had kind of more close knit kind of fatalities that happened. Prannoy's texting me right now that it counts, 45K. New York is 45 out of 100,000 cases. And there's way more than 45,000 cases here. Like, it's not even close to right. Like, even the one case that was that got confirmed in our school, the family of 5 had it and 1 got reported. If you look at us, all 4, probably nobody got reported. Like, it's widespread, and in some ways that's probably better because it brings the rate down. So anyway, that's the personal situation. The company side, we were in a situation where we were coming off of 5 quarters of really intense and continued growth. We basically are a talent platform that has a brokerage of talent agents who help identify top talent in the market. We have recruiters in-house and help companies hire better people faster. So the model had really been working. We've been scaling for 5 quarters. And then what we saw happen was a few things. Companies kind of went into 2 sectors. Our smaller customers, the mid-market kind of growth stage companies, as soon as this hit, they all stopped like a brick wall. Like, they just stopped hiring, not out of any reason in some cases, but really because they just didn't know what was coming down the pipe. And they were getting, black swan emails from Sequoia, which their investors were forwarding it to them, like, in massive, highly repetitive quantity. Our enterprise customers reacted kind of differently. So enterprise customers are big ones like Kraft Heinz, Anheuser-Busch, the list goes on. They put kind of hiring freezes on pretty quickly, with the exception of those strategic roles, like, which we were fortunately mostly working on their more senior, more strategic, kind of innovational long-term roles. So even the things for us that didn't get canceled just got slower because the executive mindset of what people were focused on, they were worried about remote work and they were worried about all these things. So they just, hiring fell off the roadmap. And then as you talk about trying to sell to new customers in this environment, if you send an email to someone saying, hey, we'd love to talk to you about your hiring, you basically look like an asshole. So we stopped that. And then, reformed our team to focus on a different set of problems, in the interim. So we were sitting in a situation where, the revenue losses had the potential to be significant, in terms of where we were coming from profitability to break even to potentially, our overhead was $750K to $1 million a quarter. The likelihood that there could be a quarter that was just, near darkness. And it could be 2 quarters that was near darkness. We don't think it's going to be 0, but it's going to be less. So what we did as a team, was a few things. One, kind of regroup to our core. So we took a look at, what are the folks, what's our absolutely top productive, top utilized headcount? Let's keep and protect these people. To, from a product perspective, where do we really want to go? Like, what really matters in the next 12 months from a features perspective? Great. Let's keep those resources. And then we conducted layoffs around kind of everything else, and went back and, proactively negotiate with vendors, slashed every contractor, just went back to our landlord just nicely. Hey, can we pay you less? They're like, no. We're like, yes, we will. I'm like, no, you won't. So, went through that game and were able to reduce our overhead from, basically cut it in half. Our senior team also came together to take salary reductions for the interim period. I slashed my salary to 0, because I can in the interim period, just to make sure that, going into this, the strategy is, we have this much in the tank. We don't want to use all of our gas money to get through it. We want to use less gas money to get through it. So after it's starting to come to an end, we still have gas left in the tank to be able to fight, and play in what the market looks like after. So, our revenue is coming, some of it's coming back online as people get more organized. We've got, some customers like Kraft and others who they're running factories now 24/7, and their business is doing incredibly well, and that's public information. Some of our media companies are continuing to do fine. So it's more just getting kind of people's attention coming back to focus on these things, which we think over the next couple of quarters will happen. It just won't happen at the same rate. So just work to get ourselves kind of in that lean fighting position.
Michael, thank you so much for being transparent about what you're dealing with. And, like some of us, he's been through a couple of cycles, but some folks on the call haven't been through an economic downturn. So that was useful to hear not only how aggressively, he went at it, but, the rationale on it and what he's trying to get to. And so this idea of using the brake and the accelerator to make sure you've got clear line of sight in your worst case, most likely scenario for 18 months of runway, I think it's just useful for all of us to be able to use that brake and that accelerator dynamically. And Michael did a really great job last week and the week before, really implementing it, and obviously been thinking about it for a while, knew what to do when it happened. I know there's a lot of questions and we are running a little bit out of time. I did want to leave it open for those that have time to stay on. So we'll probably stay an extra 10 minutes if that's okay. One of the things that we had Michael and I talked about in a previous session was around things like firing people over Zoom. Like, how do you do that and how do you manage it? How do you think about hiring in this environment? If you're, companies like Renee and Julie and, opportunistically going after talent. So Michael's firm and the links that I sent you include, if you've got talent that is coming off that you're not able to retain, you can basically register those in the community so that they're available to folks that are hiring. So hopefully we can place talented people within the group. There's other resources that Michael also made available, but there are any other questions specifically for Michael? And then we can kind of switch to the last topic about engaging with your community. Okay, well, the 15-point cash management plan is there. I encourage you to be very aggressive going after it. I think we've got, Ben, are you on?
I am.
Yeah, so Ben's one of the community members out of Boston who's been advising companies to not pay any of their vendors, don't pay your bank, don't pay your landlord. For those of us that have been through a cycle, everything's negotiable right now. So really think hard about every dollar you've got in the bank and make sure it's having impact for the business. Ben, if you want to amplify that message, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a that's a harsh assessment, and I know that we all have relationships with our vendors and employees and others. But in certain companies that we're advising and we're running the 13-week liquidity cash flow analysis and daily cash snapshots and doing a whole bunch of things that most of the companies that we worked with had never even had to think about. Survival is key. And for even most of the companies that we're talking about, even in hospitality or retail or transportation, the hardest hit companies, if they survive, they can thrive. So when we're working on our cash flow analysis, usually there's no disbursements for rent. There's no disbursements for 401k match. We're delaying interest and principal payments on banks. Everything and anything. Number one is payroll. And I heard one of the speakers talk about reducing salaries and executives taking more of a haircut, which we're advising too. But I'll tell you, there's hope. What we have found is that when you do this analysis and you cut revenue by 20%, 30%, 40%, 50% or more, there are ways to survive. So there's hope at the end of the tunnel for this. But as Chris had mentioned we're asking or advising people to tighten their belts in ways that they probably would not have been comfortable in other environments.
Hey, Ben, I appreciate that. And just to put a point on it, and I was talking to Ben yesterday, and I was even surprised, like banks basically not only deferring principal payments, but principal and interest payments with no penalties and deferring it to the end of the loan with no penalties. So I think with the Fed opening up to the banks and providing them liquidity, the banks are then really expected to provide liquidity in. I think Michael and others mentioned government support systems in Canada. It's 75% of salaries being supported over the next 3 months for small business. So again, I'd look at every knob you've got to kind of keep that 18-month window there for the accelerator and the brake. And if there's anything that you're having trouble figuring out or want some information, by all means, ask us. If we don't have the answer, we'll get you the answer. And with that, I know we're running out of time, but I did want to highlight one great thing. Michael Scissons took an initiative on top of everything else he was doing. As he mentioned, he's got a friend who's a doc at NYU. Michael, you want to talk a little bit about what you did? And we're, as a community, trying to lean in and support and amplify that work.
Yeah, so I, as I mentioned, I collect things in advance. I think I picked that up from my dad when I remember during the SARS pandemic going to Costco to load things up. So I started ordering things early and ended up picking up a bunch of N95 masks kind of before I realized that there would be, a medical shortage by any means. Last weekend, my wife asked me to take those to the hospital, and I did. And I was shocked at just like how much it meant to the doctors and nurses who literally came out, and one of the nurses literally, kind of chased after my car to thank me with tears in her eyes, and I couldn't believe just how bad it was, in the fact that we're, supposed to be sitting in the richest country in the world, and that, our frontline health workers just don't have anything. I kind of immediately started making calls and sent an email to a number of people to raise some money. Chris was one last week. And, in the course of the week, we were able to pull together, I can't remember the number, 10,000+ of them for New York that immediately got here, and sourcing them through the black market. So there's just not any on the continent right now. That's really the problem. So we were except unless you're watching Governor Cuomo's press conference, they're all behind him. But that's not the reality, in the hospitals here today. The black market, thrives, and what would be normally a $2 mask can be $6, $10, whatever dollars. And We were able to find through friends who own cleaning chemical product companies and a bunch of things, a bunch of these, and like physically take them and deliver to them to the hospital. Through other various board members, got connected to people in Asia. So now we've got lines to 2 direct factories in China. We've got potentially direct lines to 1 factory in Connecticut. Walmart's helped make connections to some of their vendors as well. None of them have anything, but then they'll let us know when they do. And we're talking to new factories now in Singapore. And, we're working through what is the complication of getting these things into the country, because as you know, various political relationships between certain places where these are made and certain places like here aren't the best. And import is complicated. All the flights have been canceled into China, so there's only charters leaving. There's big shipments that will be here, but they'll be here down the road. So we've been working on raising cash and then ultimately trying to expedite and do things that maybe governments wouldn't do from a speed perspective to make these things happen. And just had some amazing friends, literally. The head of Walmart called the head of Purelator. We found some masks. Purelator literally drove them here in a custom vehicle for 10 hours to get them to us, last week. And, what we're trying to do now is, raise more funds to get more in. So, if you've got favorite, an area that you live, if you've got a favorite province, I'm just about to kick off one for Saskatoon and Saskatchewan, which will be getting hit now in about 2 or 3 weeks. And they're going to have some real issues, especially in the lower income areas, because they've got parts of Saskatoon that will totally ignore social distancing. And it will just tear through the low income areas of the community. So if anybody has any interest in getting involved, let me know. And we've taken a broader, view, and the CareerList team as a whole, has been working as well to be helpful in receiving shipments, organizing things, kind of playing a bigger group. But we've kind of built this whole web out, of entrepreneurs now, both in North America and Asia, who are, have turned into medical supply chain experts trying to get these things in. And it all started just with, 100 mask drop off last week. And, now we just put another order in for 10,000 last night. And, I'd love to get to 1 million. But that's obviously going to take a lot of people and more logistics than I currently know how to do. But that's what we've been working on.
So look, I know a lot of you guys are doing different things for your families, for your companies, but I also encourage you to make sure that you're reaching out to the community around you. I joined a Facebook group that I sent a link on in terms of open source medical supplies. And so, there are companies like Dyson that Adrian mentioned, Bauer, that's doing, taking a hockey helmet factory and turning it into medical protective gear now in Connecticut. So there's lots of things going on. Obviously New York's getting hit really hard. And so, the fact that we were able to get some, masks, N95 masks that were sitting in a chemical cleaning company in Toronto, and 10 hours later, they're sitting at NYU in the hands of doctors and nurses who needed them. I just wanted to highlight that and thank Michael for the initiative, and those that want to continue to work with us on that, let us know. And if there's ways we can support you guys in any way, from a family, from a community point of view, from a company point of view, please let us know. We'll stay on for another 10 minutes, but those of you that have got a hard stop, stay safe. Thanks for taking to join us, and we'll have another session in 2 weeks. So thanks again to Michael and Adrian and Renee in particular for helping us with the content today.
Thanks for doing this, Chris.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, happy
Nice
to
work.
do it.
Great
Hey,
work.
Michael, do you have a second to stay on for another minute?
Yeah, I do.
And we'll see if with fewer people on, we can go open mic and just have a free form. So go ahead.
Turn the recording off, Chris.
Yeah, well, the recording will go off. Just to be clear, we're keeping the recording just within the community. It's not going to be distributed, and we'll cut the Q&A off as well and make sure the more private parts of the conversation remain so.
Do you want me to wait for people to drop off, or can I ask Michael my question? Or
go for
actually
it, Peter.
share with the community my question actually. So Michael, I mean, what you've done is great. Let me tell you the problem I'm trying to solve. I have a little more time on my hands than maybe you or some of the others. I already have an existing relationship with the Sinai Health System, so Mount Sinai Hospital and all of its affiliate hospitals. I'm on the board and I'm chairman of their marketing and branding committee. So I've got a direct dial in there. I am begging them to use me to help with whatever important